rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to today's edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I'm glad you could join me today. I want to make sure that you please go to my podcast and subscribe to my podcast. Everywhere podcasts are found, you can find me on thecarljacksonshow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Subscribe to our pages on Rumble and YouTube. Guys, we would love to see you share those videos, like those videos, review those videos. You can actually message me on any of these places as well. Also, follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. And please be sure to help out our homies, or our homie Mike Lindell at mypillow.com. You can use the promo code Carl, C-A-R-L, and take advantage of the latest and greatest deals at mypillow.com. The Giza Dream Sheets, the Percale Sheets selling for $29.98. You can buy early Christmas presents for your friends, family members, or what have you. You can also give them a call if you prefer to go that route, 800-858-0263. That's 1-800-858-0263. You're talking about a company that's not only giving you a good night's rest, but they're also providing American jobs, American manufacturing. So support our friends, support the great patriot, Mike Lindell at MyPillow, mypillow.com. Use the promo code Carl. Guys, I'm telling you, we are starting to win. I want to give you a bit of encouragement today, a bit of good news today, and then I'm going to have to hurt you just a little bit, depress you just a little bit. But I want you to know that we are starting to make a difference. I want you to understand that some of the things that you see transpiring in the news are Democrat desperation. I'm going to address this a little more. I'll be a little more in depth with this later on in the podcast, but I do want to make mention of a headline that I see. Questions surrounding John Fetterman's health spring up with recent picture. A photo of Democrat John Fetterman circulating on social media is raising additional questions about his health, despite claims from his campaign that all is well. This is from townhall.com, and he'd still be able to do the job of a senator. Senator Pat Toomey, whose seat Fetterman and Oz are currently fighting for, isn't buying it. And he says, Pat Toomey does, and I quote, "It's clear that he's being honest." Toomey said in a recent press conference about whether the progressive will debate Oz. He says, and I quote, "He's either not as well as he claims to be, or he's afraid to be called out for the radical policies he support. It's one or the other," close quote, from Senator Pat Toomey. And guys, I want you to understand, the left doesn't care about John Fetterman's health. We have reached a point where we've gone beyond Democrat or Republican. These are communists. That's what John Fetterman is. I know we're not comfortable using this terminology, but we have to get comfortable with it. These people are absolutely evil. John Fetterman is, I've heard plenty of people mention it, go over his history. You've heard Sean Hannity, you've heard Dan Bongino go over his history extensively. If you've listened to them for any period of time, this is a trust fund baby. This is a spoiled brat. This is a man that has not worked a real job, has not really lived in the real world, if you will. And the left doesn't care about that. All the left cares about is plug and play. You know, there's I've told you about this plenty of times, but I love radio control cars, right? And back in the day when I was a kid, a lot of the cars that I wanted but couldn't afford, you had to build. There were kits available. I didn't know how to build a kit as a kid, and we couldn't afford them anyway. But my dad would take us to the hobby shop and look at some of these cars, and they were so cool, you know, compared to the little cheap cars that you would get in a Walmart or a Target or a JCPenney back in the day. They really didn't have the same capabilities. You couldn't take them on the track, and some of these guys race these little toys professionally. Some of them are so fast and hardy, it's pretty cool. But then, you know, as I got older, they started advertising, hey, get rid of the kits. You know, they wanted more people to get into RC cars because so many kids were playing video games, I suspect. And so now they were like, some of their better cars, some of the better vehicles were like, hey, plug and play. You don't have to build the kits anymore. You know, just plug in a battery and you can drive this thing for as long as the battery is charged on, et cetera. Well, that's essentially what they're doing with John Fetterman. The idea now is plug and play. plug and play. That's what the left is about. The people don't matter anymore. It's about the ideas, right? All of these global elitists are plugging in the people that they need in order to advance their agenda, whether it's Joe Biden, whether it's John Fetterman. All right, so that's one thing. Charlie Crist compares himself to Jesus Christ, calls opponent Ron DeSantis to Satan. I talked about this on my local show yesterday. Charlie Crist is just desperate. He's going overboard. He's reaching. He's overdoing it, overplaying his hand. It's kind of sad to see, but it is Charlie Crist. That's what he's been known as. Military prosecutors confirm a plea deal that avoids the death penalty for 5 terrorists charged with masterminding 9/11. Why? I honestly don't know. I think the best thing to do, save ourselves a lot of money and pop a piece of brass in their head, be over and done with that. That's my opinion. If they are sincerely guilty of masterminding 9/11, some of you might disagree with me, but that's okay. We live in a free country. Not so free with Democrats in charge, but we will live in a free country again because all of us are going to fight to make sure that occurs. Here's one of the biggest stories. I think one of the biggest stories. This is the Mar-a-Lago raid. I think really destroyed the left. So now they have to double down. Now the DOJ issues 40 subpoenas and confiscates the phones of Trump officials. One of those was Boris Epstein. I've interviewed Boris Epstein before. He's also a good friend of my colleague here on the Salem Radio Network, Sebastian Gorka. This is the left is going after everyone that is a threat to their power in these major law enforcement bureaucratic institutions, the DOJ, FBI, CIA, so on, et cetera. And so they're going after any of the Trumpsters. They're trying to intimidate people. It lets you know that they're afraid. Did these people commit? No, if these people had truly committed crimes, they're still trying to get them for J6 and all this kind of stuff, still trying to promote that narrative while they're the real terrorists, while they ignore, New York Times ignores what happened in 9/11. And we're going to talk about that briefly again in just a sec, because it's important that we remember this stuff. But this is just straight up bullying because they don't want anybody to that was associated with Trump to help him run again. I think it's as simple as that, because I think Trump has dirt on them. And so they want to try to destroy them. They want to destroy them, destroy their livelihood, destroy their legal reputation, their public reputation, and all of this stuff before they get destroyed. I think it's really as simple as that. It's a sad day in America. But I want to remind you what we're talking about today. Imagine an America without guns. Imagine an America without guns. The guns, Second Amendment, it's the only thing that separates us from the rest of the societies around the world that went tyrannical. That is the only thing. That is the only thing that can stop a despot. Nobody likes to talk about that. I don't even like to talk about it. God forbid we come to another civil war. But I want you to understand that's what firearms are for. You can hunt the little bunny rabbit all you want. You can do all of that stuff. That's great. If you want to go on hunting, target, use your firearm for target practice and all that kind of good stuff. That's fine and swell. And I don't mean to minimize any of that, because that's great. And we absolutely need hunters in the United States because they help to feed us. And they actually help to feed a lot of the poor around the country. A lot of people don't know that. Hunters do. So praise God for hunters. But I want you to understand that firearms are about the Second Amendment. Now, I told you that I was going to give you some good news, but I just wanted to break down some of the headlines of the day that I think are pretty important. Oh, here's one more. U.S. and Mexico announced a joint venture into clean energy, which is a total scam. Imagine if they announced a joint venture into closing the freaking border. That would actually be newsworthy. This is just disgusting and frustrating, but that's where we are. However, I think those are the major headlines for today. Now, I want to get to some good news. I actually want you to hear a couple of pieces of audio clips, because I want you to understand that people are waking up. And then I'm going to take you to a Breitbart headline where the New York Times admits that pollsters are overestimating the candidates due to persistent and unaddressed biases in their polling. So we'll talk about that. But that's some good news before I have to. I want to make you happy, and then I'm going to have to bring you down a little bit, because I've got to encourage you to keep fighting for this country. So, Gabe, let's go ahead and play this first audio clip. This first audio clip and video, for those of you that are tuning in, please be sure to subscribe to my Rumble account, thecarljacksonshow.com, YouTube, thecarljacksonshow.com, so that you can see this video, because I really do want you to see this video as well as hear it and share it with your friends, family members, all together. But this is the mayor of New Orleans. I want you to hear what she has to say. She's been flying first class at the taxpayers' expense, and she's allowed to fly on business, on government business, but she's supposed to take, the regular seating, the economic class, economic flights or what have you. She's not doing that, and she's not paying for the difference, which she's supposed to do. Here's what the local news had to say about it. Go ahead, Gabe.
Whether or not New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell needs to reimburse the city for her first-class travel upgrades may come down to who she works for. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for watching. I'm Katie Moore.
And I'm Sheree Skipson. The city travel policy is that city employees must buy the lowest airfare available or pay the difference if they elect to travel in other sections.
And Paul Murphy reports the legal question now is, does the policy apply to elected officials, such as the mayor?
A defiant New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell is refusing to pay the city roughly $29,000 she charged this year to upgrade her city air travel to business and first class.
All expenses incurred doing business on behalf of the city of New Orleans will not be reimbursed to the city of New Orleans. One thing is clear, I do my job, and I will continue to do it with distinction, with dignity and integrity every step of the way. And so that's what I'll have to say on that.
The city's travel policy states employees are required to purchase the lowest airfare available, and that employees who choose to upgrade from coach economy or business class flights are solely responsible for the difference in cost. The policy also states any reconciliation of travel expenses that results in overpayment by the city requires that the employee reimburse the city within 20 business days.
Well, the policy of the city of New Orleans says that employees, if they decide to fly first class as opposed to the lower fare, they have to reimburse the city.
The mayor listed the city of New Orleans as her employer on her financial.
We can stop right there, but she says she's doing her job. LaToya Cantrell did, the mayor of New Orleans. She said, I do my job. Well, part of your job is saving the taxpayers' money. Part of your job is serving the taxpayers. This is what I want you to understand about the Democrat Party today. They don't exist to serve you. They exist to be served by you. When they win elected offices, they really believe and they hold on to this principle that they are in charge. You're the children, they're the parent, and they can tell you exactly what to do. This lady, LaToya Cantrell, is absolutely no different. She's absolutely no different. And I think it's always good when we shine a spotlight on who Democrats really are. LaToya Cantrell is emblematic of who the Democrat Party is. The Democrat Party, as it exists today, they're not full of liberals, they're not full of moderates. Otherwise, there'd be an uprising among them. They are going on with the radical left of their party. The radical left runs the Democrat Party. The Marxists, the socialists, the communists, they run the Democrat Party, and no one in the Democrat Party has anything to say about it. Joe Manchin, we thought, Senator of West Virginia, we thought were standing up against him. No, it turns out he was a fraud. So there's no one standing in the gap to stop them. But this is good news. These people are being exposed for exactly who they are. Americans are struggling to pay their bill. I read a Heritage Foundation headline today. Basically, a household debt now, given our national debt, basically every household owes $230,000. Gabe, do you have $230,000 sitting around? It's I'm just wondering. I don't. Listen, I don't have $230,000 sitting around, but the government thinks we do, and we're going to have to pay that back. We're going to pay it back through inflation. We're going to pay it back through higher taxes. These people live high on the hog, and they expect those of us that don't make the money that they do to pay for it, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So I think that's good news. Here's more good news, and I'm going to expound on this tomorrow. I'm going to show you this other video, and I forget the gentleman's name. But he's in Europe, and he addresses the EU, and he calls out the climate change, the climate change hoax, as he calls it, or the climate hoax, as he calls it. I want you to listen to this video. I want you to watch this video again. You can subscribe to the podcast to listen to it wherever podcasts are found, thecarljacksonshow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com. But if you want to see it, and I do want you to see these videos, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, thecarljacksonshow.com, also rumble.com, The Carl Jackson Show on rumble.com. But here's the video. By chance, do we know the name of this guy? Godfrey Bloom. Godfrey Bloom. That's his name. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, let's go ahead and play the video clip, Gabe.
Mr. President, I take the opportunity of wishing the East European cities well in the coming of the very early skiing season and snow and ice that's come there, what of course is indicative of the fact that, as independent science has now confirmed, that the globe is actually cooling and has been cooling since 2002, broadly flat since 1998. We're all talking about something here which isn't happening. I've heard time and time again members here talk of CO2 as a pollutant. A pollutant is a life-giving natural gas. It gives me the impression that some of our members haven't had the benefit of a formal education. Isn't this really just about the state being able to get its hand in ordinary people's trouser pocket to steal yet more tax from them? Isn't this all about political control? Isn't all this about politics and big business? The whole thing's a sham. This bogus hypothesis, this ridiculous nonsense that man-made CO2 is causing global warming. Enough, please, before we damage irrevocably the global economy.
All right. I love it. And actually, we're going to play that video again for you tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm going to be talking about how the Green New Deal is the new white supremacy. So make sure you tune in to tomorrow's podcast and tell everyone that you know that all of you that are listening today, everyone that you know, tell them to listen tomorrow. I'm gonna prove to you that the Green New Deal is the new white supremacy. They're not going to be calling us on the right white supremacists anymore. And when I say the right, I'm speaking of America's conservatives, America's Republican Party, America's religious right, if you will. So we'll be speaking about that tomorrow. Here's some more good news. But the reason before I go on, the reason why I wanted Gabe to play that video is because I want you to understand people are standing up against this stuff. All of this stuff, everything the left is doing, whether it's trans rights, whether it's climate change or global warming, they change it to climate change because it's much harder to defend or go on the offense against climate change as opposed to global warming. When this guy says, hey, listen, the EU, the skiing season has started early because we're actually experiencing global cooling right now, not global warming. So the left wants to be able to control us no matter what the weather is. So they just changed the wording to climate change because they're good at word changing, basically, in order to advance their narratives, in order to advance their agendas. That's exactly what they do. But this is good news because we've got more people like this guy, Godfrey Bloom, that are now going on the offense. Hopefully we'll see more American politicians, particularly in the Republican Party, go on the offense and not just say we need an all of the above approach. I'm so tired of the all of the above. No, we need oil and freaking fossil fuels, because they are the ones that keep people out of poverty and bring people out of poverty. It's so insane. Renewable energies do not do that. It requires slave labor for those of you that might have a problem against that, and actually destroys the environment because of the mining. It's a total sham. It's a total sham. And it's time to fight back against this stuff instead of, yes, we need an all of the above approach, trying to sound politically correct. Screw the all of the above approach. If people want to buy EVs, so be it. But make sure there's a freaking warning tag on these cars and on solar panels and all of these things that, you know what, you're contributing to destroying the environment, for God's sakes. I'm so tired of it. I'm tired of Republicans and conservatives not fighting. It's starting to piss me off. To be honest with you. All right. Nonetheless, I digress. I told you I was going to bring you good news, but tomorrow you're going to get you're getting the taste of what you're going to hear tomorrow. All right. Hat tip Breitbart. New York Times admits that pollsters are overestimating Democrat candidates due to a persistent and unaddressed biases. Pollsters could be overestimating, they say, the strength of Democrat Senate candidates with, quote, persistent and unaddressed biases in survey research. You don't say. All right. The New York Times reported this yesterday via data analysis. The data was assembled by analyzing and comparing the 2016 and 2020 elections, which created a, quote, poll error, unquote, that reveals Democrat Senate candidates in 2020 in this cycle, in the 2022 cycle, are actually outrunning expectations in the same places where the polls overestimated Biden in 2020 and Hillary Clinton in 2016. The overestimated Democrat expectations match polling failures in previous elections, according to Breitbart. Now, this polling happens to be happening in battleground states. Isn't that peculiar? The states where pollsters in 2022 could be overestimating Democrat strength are in key races that will determine which party controls the Senate. They include Ohio, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Again, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. So all of these people that are running for Senate on the GOP side, guys, it's time to support them. It's time to back them on social media. It's time to back them with your friends. It's time to back them monetarily if you can do so. If it's $25 or, whatever, $50, if it's the absolute maximum, it's time to support these candidates because basically these polls have been created to shape the election, not to inform you about the election, as the one and only Maharishi used to explain to all of us. It's so true. These polls are created to shape elections oftentimes. Now, obviously, we use polls. I talk about polls here. We all have this. It's exciting to talk about polls, let's be honest. But we know what the left is up to today, and we know how they can use polls. So listen, again, Ohio, you got J.D. Vance. Pennsylvania, you got Dr. Oz. In Arizona, you got Blake Masters. Georgia, you got Herschel Walker. Wisconsin, you've got Ron Johnson. Now is the time to try to help out all of them, or if you have a particular one that you're fond of, send them some money. Blake Masters is gaining ground in Arizona. Super PAC, a conservative super PAC, has just, I think, helped him out with about $5 million worth of ads that they're going to be running for the guy. So we can make inroads in all of these states. So do not give up. This is good news. Warning signs is flashing again. The Times wrote about previous polling, and they say, and I quote, "It raises the possibility that the apparent Democratic strength in Wisconsin and elsewhere is a mirage, an artifact of persistent and unaddressed biases in survey research." So the same New York Times that ignored the 9/11 attacks, what I'll get onto shortly, is now warning people, listen, these polls could be biased. We're a little concerned. They're warning Democrats, hey, you better get off your duff and do something for these candidates. But I don't think Democrats are going to be motivated to buy a $230,000 house that they can't, that they'll never live in, but get to pay for. And I'm speaking of inflation. Obviously, that's how much every household now owes under Biden with our national debt. $230,000 you owe, and you're going to pay that back. You're not going to get an invoice from the federal government, but you are, in this sense, you're going to be paying more for goods. You're going to be paying more in taxes. You're going to be paying more in inflation. So you're going to pay the bill somehow. They're going to keep you impoverished somehow so that they can pretend as if they're always needed, because you're always going to need their help. Most pollsters haven't made significant methodological changes since the last election, according to the New York Times. The major polling community post-mortem declared that it was, quote, impossible, close quote, to definitively ascertain what went wrong in the 2020 election. You guys may remember in 2016, so many people were getting it wrong. Trafalgar rose to the top of the food chain, if you will, because they got it right. Why? Because they were going around, much like Selena Zito does, who's a journalist, I believe, for the Washington Examiner, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, she's in Pennsylvania, and she takes the pulse of the people, whether it's the people in Pennsylvania, whether it's Ohioans. She goes around and she actually interviews real people. She goes to real political events, or, real events around these cities and these communities, these blue collar cities and towns. And she listens to the people. She interviews the people. These pollsters don't do that. Right. So that's good news. Now, here's an example. Wisconsin is a good example. They say on paper, the Republican Senator Ron Johnson ought to be favored to win the re-election. The 538 Fundamentals Index, for instance, makes him a 2-point favorite. Instead, the polls have exceeded the wildest expectations of Democrats. All right. But don't get worried yet. The state's gold standard Marquette Law School survey even showed the Democrat Mandela Barnes leading Mr. Johnson by 7 percentage points. OK, so it sounds like Ron Johnson is really in trouble, and perhaps you shouldn't donate to Ron Johnson, Senator Ron Johnson, because it's a waste of time. He's a real fighter. He's been a real fighter in the Senate for conservative values and for freedom and for the Constitution. So these pollsters want you to know that Ron Johnson doesn't stand a chance. He's 7 points behind. But then the article goes on. But in this case, good for Wisconsin Democrats might be too good to be true. The state was ground zero for survey error in 2020 when pre-election polls proved to be too good to be true for Biden. In the end, the polls overestimated Biden about 8 percentage points. Eerily enough, Mr. Barnes is faring better than expected by a similar margin. So the same thing can be true for Ron Johnson. Chances are they are overestimating his opponents. Mr. Barnes are overestimating his poll numbers because the polls are inherently biased. All right. It's as simple as that. As a result, it says the Times noted that David Wasserman's Cook political midterm report or political report midterm predictions could be faulty if the polls turn out to be as wrong as they were in 2020. All right. So let me just read this part. The Cook political report has been wrong in 2020. The Cook political report predicted Republicans would lose up to 15 House seats to add to their 34-seat majority. But the estimate was 29 seats off. Instead, Republicans gained 14 House seats, and the Democrats entered 2021 with a narrow 222 to 213 House majority. So I suspect that these pollsters are wrong again. They are trying to shape the news. They're trying to do everything they can to intimidate people or to discourage voters from coming out. In the same way, they're trying to intimidate anyone that would be willing to work with Donald Trump, because we all know that he is going to run again. So they're trying to make it painful for anyone to coalesce around Donald Trump, particularly in his inner circle, particularly White House staffers. They want them to know that if they join this Trump team, then their lives are going to be miserable post-Trump. The difference is Trump will know what to do going into office. So that's a major factor. Now, I want to, before I get to the issues of guns and the crime that's happening across the United States, that I want you to pay attention to. I want you guys to be keenly aware of the level of crime that has been growing under Democratic control across the country. We're seeing, as a result, I think, of Democratic control and Democrat lockdowns that came subsequent to COVID, or after the pandemic hit. I think we're seeing a rise in crime. Kids that weren't in school, people that have that were already crazy, gone straight up nutso. When we're seeing some pretty gruesome crimes take place, and I'll talk about a couple of those. But first, before I do, I want to remind you to never forget 9/11. 9/11 is so important. It is so crucial. A lot of people are trying to erase and trying to forget 9/11, but I think it's more important than ever to remember. Why? Because 9/11 it's sad to say, but this is true. 9/11 and major catastrophes in American history often brings people together. They do. War will bring about unity, or an attack such as we saw in 9/11 will bring about unity. And I think it's one of the reasons the left wants us to forget this. And it's a sad state of affairs. I talked about this the other day, but I'll just mention it again. I think these are some of the reasons why the left wants us to forget 9/11. For one, it reminds us that there are American heroes. And American heroes often look like policemen. They often look like firefighters. They often look like doctors and nurses, although many have been very disappointing in these COVID lockdowns. But they often look like those people that are facing danger, that are in the case of the nurses and doctors, that are helping those that were in danger, that are hurting, or in the case of firemen, in the case of police officers, often running into danger in order to protect others. The same could be true of soldiers, obviously. So one reason the left wants us to forget about 9/11, because they want us to forget that there is a such thing as American heroes. They want us to forget that masculinity is a good thing. When you see men going into a collapsing building, a building that's on fire, you remember, oh, wait a minute. We do need men, real men in society. It's very, very important. It's very, very important. Also, the left wants to forget 9/11 because it shows us how weak the left is in dealing with foreign policy. All we have to do is harken back to the Afghanistan debacle, which has now given us a war in Ukraine, has given us Xi Jinping on the march against Taiwan. That's all we need to. That's what we need to know. We can look at Russia. We can look at China. We can look at Iran. They're becoming homies. They're becoming allies, if you will, even though they don't necessarily like each other, because they hate us more. So this is thanks to Biden. This is what we're experiencing. And these are some of the reasons that we can never forget 9/11. We also have to remember that the enemies on the outside in foreign territory are way worse than the alleged enemy that's your next door neighbor. That's something that you have to remember. Your next door neighbor isn't necessarily your enemy. Now, the politicians in Washington, D.C., yes, they are. I'm sorry. Or the leftists in Washington, D.C., yes, they are. They are an enemy, and I think they should be treated as such. And I'm talking about at the ballot box, all right? So don't get all crazy. Another thing is the left thinks we deserve 9/11. They think we deserve 9/11. It's a sad fact, but they think we deserve 9/11. It's sad. It's sad, but I think that we should remember 9/11 so that we can expose more leftists, so we can fight back against their nonsense. And also, the reason why they want to forget, the left wants to forget or erase 9/11 is simply because we recognize who the real terrorists are. We recognize how dangerous they are, not just to Republicans or to Democrats or to everybody that considers themselves an American. There's a greater threat out there. So they want us to forget this stuff. We're not going to forget this stuff. Bernie Kerik makes a great point. Bernie Kerik, he's a former New York City police commissioner during 9/11. And he talked about how only 14 school districts, I think it is, or 14 states, I'm sorry. So only 14 states are required to teach about 9/11. That's insane. Thank God, Frank Siller of Tunnel to Towers, he's the founder of Tunnel to Towers. I'm sure all of you know his story, but he started a curriculum based on the attacks for kids K through 12. So pray for him, donate to them. So hopefully that'll spread. Gordon Felt, he's the president of Families of Flight 93. He said that young people who may not have been alive during 9/11 have questions about it. They often come to the memorial that's based upon the United Flight 93, which crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and they'll ask him questions about it. Like school kids travel to that memorial and they'll ask questions. And he's like, man, people want to know. It's also therapeutic for him to be able to talk about this. And those that were associated with victims, he had a family member on the flight. So those that are associated, is very therapeutic for them. I think that are therapeutic for the country, but it's also a warning and a reminder to the next generation that there are always bigger enemies abroad, and we need to be aware of that. So that's something that we have to work on. Only 14 states, again, are required to teach about 9/11, and that's something that's just very dangerous and detrimental. So never forget 9/11. Make sure you teach your kids about 9/11. Don't stop talking about 9/11. Eventually, there will come a day where there won't be any, parades or events to honor the dead in 9/11, but you can honor the dead right at your house and with your own family members and friends by never forgetting what happened on 9/11 and remembering that there's always a greater threat to America from the outside, or people that hate us even more. Even though the left is pretty quick to tear us down on the interior, we have to remind them that Americans have more in common with each other than they do some radical Islamic terrorists. Very important. Now, here's something that I really want to get to. Very, very important. Very important. Sorry, it's taking me so long to get to this, but I want you to understand. I'm doing a lot of work going on here for you guys. You don't understand all the work that I put in for you guys. All this work that comes through these formerly fingerprinted fingertips, I do all for you and for the sake of freedom. That's how much I love you guys. All right, just remember that. All right, now the Federalist hat tip: credit card giants conspire with Democrats to monitor consumer gun purchases. Guys, I want you to understand. I want you to put all of this into context. I want you to put into context what's happening with the Trump supporters or Trump's team, this rogue FBI, this rogue Department of Justice under the leadership of Merrick Garland. Understand what the Second Amendment is for. Understand what the Second Amendment is for. It is essentially so that we don't have no, it isn't essentially. The Second Amendment exists so that we can fight against a tyrannical government. Politicians should never feel like, they should never be under the impression that they're somehow more important than the average American, like LaToya Cantrell. She should never believe, well, I'm doing my job. No, you're not doing your job. Your job is not to spend people's money. Your job is to manage and be a good steward of people's money while protecting them, keeping the city safe and keeping the city clean and keeping the city prosperous. Not spending the city's money where it does not need to be spent because you want to feel like a queen when you're a freaking servant. Need to understand the difference. You need to understand the difference. And right now, we have a problem with politicians who believe they are supposed to be served instead of serving others. It's a big issue, and it's bringing us close to what it's certainly the most authoritarian government that I've seen in my lifetime by far. And I thought Barack Obama was bad. He's not even close when you consider what's happening under the Biden administration and the left today. The left, which is the Democrat Party today. Let me talk about crime, actually, before I get to this. To protect us against a tyrannical government, I want you to also understand the level of crime that exists today in crime has been bad. There's no doubt, but crime decreased, even homicides, rapes, and all this. Under the last 20 years, crime was decreasing. Violent crime was decreasing. Even since they outlawed, they had this, what do they call the assault weapons ban or what have you? Crime didn't really go down during the assault weapons ban because no one really knew what that was, right? So crime didn't really decrease. It kind of stayed at about a certain level, but afterwards, crime actually, once that was gone bye, crime started decreasing precipitously in pretty large numbers. But now those numbers are beginning to skyrocket again post the pandemic and post the lockdowns. I should say post the lockdowns. And so just always remember what the Second Amendment is for. There's a story that took place in, I think it's San Carlos, if I'm not mistaken. San Carlos, California, it is. So Thursday morning, a young mother of two was beheaded in front of her horrified witnesses. Now, I talked about this story, but Gateway Pundit shared something that many of us didn't know at the time. The guy was an illegal alien. The guy's an illegal alien. Now, he dated this woman. He had a child with this woman. This woman had two kids. I believe her kids were 1, and I believe the other was 7, if I recall correctly. But the 1-year-old, the younger baby, was by this murderer, Jose Landante or Landeta Solano. He severed his ex's head. They had gotten into some argument. She had a restraining order against him, but they were in a texting battle or a messaging battle at one point in time. I think on Snapchat, I had read somewhere else where she was threatening to expose, if he kept threatening her, threatening to expose that this guy had been involved in, I guess, a homosexual lifestyle that his homies didn't know about. And some of the things that he had apparently had sex with a minor. He had a criminal history of sorts, and a lot of his homies didn't know about this. She was threatening to expose him. So the next day, they get in an argument. He's at her place where he shouldn't be. He chops off her head in broad daylight. People actually witness this. The cops arrive on the scene, and her head is behind her car. I mean, her body is behind the car, but her head is rolled up underneath the vehicle. Now, obviously, this is one story. We also know about Eliza Fletcher. Eliza Fletcher, the billionaire heiress that was a school teacher out for a jog in the morning. And you have this, I forget his name, but you have this guy that comes out, murders her. And guys, I know crimes like this existed, although this beheading, I mean, that sounds like straight out of Iraq. But straight out of the ISIS playbook, for God's sakes. But nonetheless, crime is growing more rampant, and violent crime is more rampant. So you have to be on your guard. So we need firearms. Could you imagine, ladies, if you are dealing with an abusive man like this, obviously abusive, and yet he got to a point where he's going to sever off your head? Listen, the greatest equalizer between a man and a woman when it comes to protection, when it comes to violent crime, is a firearm. A woman, I don't care how strong and fit she is, she can never match the strength of a man. Unless he's some peon little, whatever. There's always an exception. Excuse me. But generally speaking, that is the case. So the greatest equalizer to stop the threat of a man attacking a woman is a firearm. Make sure you guys keep some serious pepper spray on you as well, or some type of tool instrument that can keep people from a distance. Your first goal should be to escape, get out of the situation. So a pepper spray or stun gun or whatever it may be, go to a local arms dealer, try to find out about self-defense classes where you can really protect yourself. And your first goal is to get away, to learn to escape. Find out about that stuff, because it's going to be very important in this time, in this environment where crime is going to get worse. Crime is going to get worse. But I want you to understand the life without firearms. You have a rogue law enforcement agency, federal law enforcement agency. They have become the intimidation arm of the Democrat Party, who is a fascist party. They talk about the left being a fascist party. No, it's the Democrat Party that's a fascist party. I'll prove it to you in another story in just a second. So it's important to remember this. Imagine a world without firearms. Imagine an America without guns. That's exactly what we're seeing. Look at how bad things are now. Imagine if we didn't have the Second Amendment. If you were anti-Second Amendment, or if you were on the fence about Second Amendment, you better wake the hell up, because your freedom is at stake. And I don't say that lightly. Your freedom is at stake. What's on the ballot this November? Freedom. You vote for Democrats this November, you're anti-freedom. You vote for a Republican, hopefully a good one, but far better than the leftist by any stretch of the imagination, you're voting for freedom. Hat tip the Federalists. Credit card giants conspire with Democrats to monitor consumer gun purchases. After facing mounting pressure from Democrats and anti-gun activists, credit card giants Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. Oh my God, please. If there is an alternative credit card out there that's actually worth something, please someone message me and let me know. Let me know, please, or someone get to working on that, por favor. We need this alternative economy. Because we see how these people are just falling to the left. This is fascism. This is fascism. Public-private partnership with the government in order to suppress our rights. That's authoritarianism. That's fascism. This is what the left is doing, in cahoots with major corporations. The latest, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, which all announced plans this week to single out their customers' purchases at firearm stores. I want you guys to hear what I'm about to read. I want you guys to listen to this, because I was even misinformed about what's really happening and how far this will go. Using a new 4-digit merchant category code, credit card companies will now categorize any purchases at gun and ammunition stores. Did you catch that? Did you catch that? Any purchase at gun and ammunition stores. Not just firearms, not just ammo. You go there and you buy a can of pepper spray. You go there and buy maybe a holster. You go, I don't know, maybe they sell bananas. But if you make a purchase at that store, you're going to be put on the list. Carry cash. Carry cash. Guys, I know a lot of us are excited to go into this digital economy. I'm not one of them. It's not just because I'm old school and I suck at and I suck at technology. Don't laugh, Gabe. And I suck at technology. It's because these fools can follow you everywhere. There's no such thing as privacy. And we've allowed them to do this to us. We've allowed them to do this to us. All right, so again, using a new 4-digit merchant category code, credit card companies will now categorize any purchases at gun ammunition stores. That's any purchases, again, I reiterate, at gun ammunition stores, regardless if those purchases are firearms or not, as separate from other shopping. If the credit card companies deem any of those transactions suspect, they will report them to local law enforcement agencies. Make sure, and there's another thing, make sure that your sheriff is a good sheriff. Pay attention to local elections. Know who you're putting in office. In these city commissioner races or city council races, you better pay special attention to them. These people have tons of power. Mayoral races, your sheriff, these people have a lot more power than you realize. They can stop a lot of this nonsense unless they're woke themselves. Visa, MasterCard, and American Express all adopted the new standards this Saturday, shortly after the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, which is known for setting standards for Western business transactions, approved the change regarding gun store purchases on Friday. The ISO caved to pressure from Democrats, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, who has a haircut like a little boy, and I cannot stand that lady. So just 1 week prior, Elizabeth Warren demanded financial CEOs be their eyes and ears when it comes to, and I quote, certain types of suspicious activities, including straw purchases and unlawful bulk purchases that could be used in the commission of domestic terrorist acts or gun trafficking schemes. So she's looking for law-abiding citizens in the gun store. By the way, how the hell can you have a straw purchase in an establishment like a legal gun store? These people don't even know what they're talking about. All they know is that they want power. That's what they understand. Here's more from Senator Elizabeth Warren with the little boy haircut. Mass shooters have repeatedly financed deadly massacres using credit cards, and bank CEOs need to step up to save lives. Now, maybe they've already stepped up to save lives because you guys remember there are about 2 million gun defenses every single year, I guarantee you, from people that probably use credit cards to purchase their firearm. But that's not mentioned. You have a few mass shootings. You have a handful of mass shootings. I'm not minimizing public mass shootings, all right? I'm not minimizing them at all, but you have a handful that you can probably look at annually. You have 2 million cases where a good guy or a good woman with a gun stops a violent crime. It may not even be that they have to pull out their weapon. They may just pat it on their side, let the perpetrator know. A law enforcement officer may be around, and because that person knows that person, that law enforcement officer, that deputy, that sheriff has a firearm, they stop a crime. It happens in a number of ways, but 2 million gun stops annually, every year on average. And you're talking about a few public mass shootings that are horrendous, that are tragic, that are the epitome of evil. But they are a tiny, 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 tiny fraction when it comes to how people use firearms. Those people are evil, and they just happen to use the firearm as a tool. But there are millions of good people that use firearms as a tool for good, and that's never talked about. Man, these people, these are fascists. Elizabeth Warren is a fascist. Credit card companies rejected this notion or this fascism a year ago when the Amalgamated Bank president and CEO Priscilla Sims Brown. What's up with these chicks? What's up with these chicks that are ushering in fascism? It's almost as if they need to prove something to the men, as if they're even tougher, right? By taking away your civil liberties. I really, there really is an issue with left-wing women that love power. Ooh, that's sexist, girl. So what? So Priscilla Sims Brown demanded financial institutions surveil the firearm industry using merchant category codes. Her initial plea to the ISO in June 2021 was rejected based on recommendations then from Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, but now they buckled to the pressure. Margot Cleveland, she's a senior legal correspondent for the Federalist. She said in previous coverage of MasterCard and Visa, she suggested that, quote, disrupting the sale of illegal goods through the payment networks of MasterCard, Visa, and their partner banks appears more effective than legal action. Indeed, it is, right? I mean, it's a wider net. You catch everybody, virtually everybody. Not many people can just go afford to pay cash for a gun. But if you can't, you're going to have to save up and do it. Excuse me. Or you're going to have to save up and do it. And she says it's more dangerous or more disruptive because both Visa and MasterCard can, quote, punish banks out of doing business with entities that the credit card companies classify as illegal or problematic. So they can punish banks out of business, out of doing business. So this is a major win for the left. The New York Attorney General, Letitia James, thought so. So anything Letitia James likes legally, you should hate because she's a fascist herself. So what these people are. Guys, you better fight for the Second Amendment. You better not be lazy about it. You better not be passive about it. It is the only thing that separates us from liberty and tyranny. It's the firearm is the evil stopper of the day, all right? Besides the Lord Jesus Christ himself. But it is the physical manifestation of an evil stopper, if you will. And I'm talking about tyranny. I'm talking about violent crimes against people. All of this stuff works together. All of this stuff, crime. The left essentially gets their brown shirts to commit crimes, and then they can argue, see what guns do. We need to take away your guns. Food shortages. Oh, climate change. Oh my God. We've got to make sure that we're not spreading any fertilizer, synthetic fertilizer. So there's 8 billion people on the earth. We stop using synthetic fertilizer. We just go to natural manure. Then basically we'll have to kill off 5 billion people or so. But hey, all in the name of saving the planet. We'll kill 5 billion people, although you won't, because it takes 3 times as much land that has to be destroyed by animals, by cows, in order to produce the manure. I mean, it's a sham. This guy, Godfrey Bloom, got it right. It's a complete and utter sham. Guys, imagine an America without firearms. I hope we're not getting to that point. And I hope if you were anti-Second Amendment, you've just become a supporter of the Second Amendment. Join a gun group that fights for these rights. The Second Amendment Foundation, SAF, is a good one. You can Google them. The same is true for the Gun Owners of America. A couple of good places to be a part of. The NRA has had their problems. I think it's worth buying the basic membership there, but I would suggest you side with the Second Amendment Foundation of the Gun Owners of America for now. All right, guys. Anyway, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast everywhere podcasts are found. You can find us at SalemPodcastNetwork.com, theCarlJacksonShow.com. Make sure you put the word "the" in front, and everywhere where you get your podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Please, please, please join me on social media. Facebook, old school. You can go old school. The Carl Jackson Show. Twitter, The Carl Jackson Show. Getter, if you're on Getter, we'd love to see you there. All right, really trying to build up the numbers on Getter and True Social, The Carl Jackson Show. And don't forget our sponsor, Mike Lindell of MyPillow, MyPillow.com. Take advantage of the deal today. Go to MyPillow.com right now and use that promo code Carl. Get yourself some Giza Dream Sheets. Get yourself some Percale sheets on sale right now, $29.98 for my listeners. All right, go to MyPillow.com. Click on the Radio Listener Square. The Radio Listener Square. Type in the promo code Carl, C-A-R-L, or if you prefer to call, 800-858-0263. Guys, please, you can bless MyPillow. You can bless American Jobs. You can bless this podcast by going to MyPillow.com. Use that promo code Carl. All right, and you can use it for any products that are on that website as well. And the deals will apply. A deal that is applicable will apply. All right, guys, until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.